All right, we are live for the Friday edition of the News Update. And as always, looking forward to connecting and sharing my 2 cents on a variety of subject matter. And it looks like the idea of more boots in the region is causing the markets to be spooked slightly. And so we got metals down, stock indices down, we got bond yields up. We have lots of things happening right now, but yet the narrative, man, it's all about the narrative. And as you look over the last 3 weeks in particular to the messaging coming out of the White House in reference to how long this will last, it changes every single interview from Donald Trump, which to me just plays more into the fact that he has no say so in whatever. He's literally doing what he's told, in my opinion. And of course, we have Benjamin Netanyahu coming out revealing that he's actually alive. But then again, who is he speaking to is the question. He's speaking in English, not even in his language, his native tongue, which lets us know that, yeah, the propaganda is intensifying and we haven't even really gotten to the midst of what's going to happen. So we're going to talk about that and a lot more. But as always, for those who are plugged in, let me know where you're watching from. Let me know if my audio is coming in good. And I will definitely jump into it. I have 6, 7, 8 tabs open. Might want to do some sound bites of just things that, I find to be very interesting. So we're going to make the most of this time, man. And yeah, enjoy ourselves. So hope everyone's doing well. For those who are plugging in, let me know where you're watching from in the chat. Definitely would love to give you a quick shout out. And if you haven't as of yet, make sure you subscribe so that you'll stay plugged in, and then hit the bell as well as drop a comment so that your opinions, thoughts, voices can be heard amongst the other community members so that everybody can have a say so in what's happening and their take on this current ordeal that we're all experiencing in real time. And so let's just jump into it. So I want to just touch on the metals markets, man. So as of right now, as I mentioned from a previous live stream, expect lower lows every day due to the fact that I think silver and gold at this current moment will continue to experience more downward pressure. And we will probably, until the Fed decides to accommodate the markets in general, experience more of a drawdown. So that creates an opportunity for those who have the readily available cash to go ahead and get your weight up continuously. So keep that in mind because the spigot will get cut back on at some point because you can't have a continuous war without liquidity. Therefore, the Fed will be forced to supply that liquidity. Okay, so let's just keep it moving right along. And I want to get into just some other price figures worth keeping an eye on. And so as you can see here on the screen, let me refresh my screen so that we're all up to date on the actual prices at the current moment. And so gold 45, silver 69, platinum 19, palladium 42, copper 5, crude oil 96, Brent is 105. We got regular oil 96, natural gas 3, and right on down the like. And so literally lots of red on the screen. And what really caught my attention was right here. And so we got the Magnificent Seven, not doing too well right now. And this is opening market activity based upon the narrative of troops moving. And so we have a president who was very adamant in saying that this will be over quick, it'll end soon, and da 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 da. But once again, clearly he's not in control of what's going on. And so it just shows how more and more of it's unfortunate that our nation is literally just being leveraged and used for the sake of others, put it like that. So here's some of the narratives I wanted to touch on. So I just typed in Trump says war over soon, and these are some things that popped up. So going back 2 weeks ago, as it says here, it says Trump says Iran war will end very soon, predicts lower oil prices. And this is before the surge that we saw up to $120 a barrel. So once again, it says a week ago, Trump says Iran war will be over pretty quickly. That's what he was quoted as saying. Then it goes down a little bit further. It says Trump says he won't declare Iran war over until after claiming. It says, yeah, okay. And then it says Trump says Iran war will be over very soon. Okay, military excellence save us from Trump's whatever. Trump says the war is very complete as of 2 weeks ago. And then it says Trump's officially privately fear Iran war will grind on. Let me click on this one here. Grind on through September as 200 troops are injured. So this is earlier this week. And so now we have the idea of September. And this is what's on the table right here. And it doesn't help when you have a Department of War head basically coming out and saying that, what does he say? Hegseth says potential 200 billion Iran war spending request could shift. It says it takes money to kill bad guys. Think about that. It takes 200 billion to kill bad guys, which in and of itself spells prolonged event. And so that's just to get things started. Not to mention all the other funds that the Pentagon can't account for. So we got narrative shifting around how long this excursion will be, the request for 200 billion plus, and then you have the idea of troops moving, and it's led to a lot of jitters and uncertainty in the financial markets. And once again, this is just the beginning of what will be a long drawn out process, because the U.S. is not cut out for what the Persians are capable of withstanding, in my opinion. Okay, so let's get into some other things here. Outside of the drawdown in the markets, let me just share with you some things that are worth paying attention to. So on the screen, if I can put it back up here, this is the 10-year Treasury note. So as of now, as stocks decide to sell off, bond yields of the 10-year, as well as other nations' 10-year notes, are surging. So literally, people are experiencing or expressing doubt in the safety of U.S. liabilities, i.e., the increase in the bond yields itself, indicating a sell-off. And so the U.S. is already in a tight pinch when it comes to 39 trillion, and the idea that the Fed is not going to accommodate at this current moment. I kind of laid out a case as to why I believe they'll hold off as long as they can, because everything is centered around the banks and the private credit sector. And so, once again, we're going to need some jawboning out of the White House to kind of provide calm and ease, because this administration is hard pressed on the idea that he can't go through this current term without there being some type of hopium in the markets, because once again, his primary bragging rights is the stock market. And if the stock market isn't in the green, then it puts him in a very tight pinch. And so I'd imagine the frustration on his part is going to intensify, because he's just one individual who happens to be the front man for the establishment behind him. And outside of doing what he's told to do, it's not really much he can do other than try to keep the American populace pacified or satisfied while losing support behind this. And so that's why we're witnessing, I believe, all these polls come out showing how favorable his presidency is and how his approval rating amongst the MAGA crowd is so strong these days. And so literally the intensifying of propaganda, which is, one of my favorite books here. So if anybody read this book here, you get an idea to understand how the government, it's in their best interest to make sure that they tell you what you want to hear and try to confuse the masses as best as they can to keep division amongst us. But actually, we can all see what's happening right now. And this goes more into a lot of my long-term thesis as to how this plays out for the remainder of this decade. Because as we are pretty confidently able to say, this is not going to come to an end in a timely manner, and the ramifications of all the damage that's been done will be a lingering effect. Therefore, the Western way of life is shifting day by day. And I don't even think we really kicked off how bad it's actually going to end up being in the days ahead. And so this right here plays a major role in why I believe is going to be something that will be memorable. Let me get my screen on together here. Give me 1 second here. And I'll show you some of the narratives that is spooking. So it says here, let me get this off the screen. It says Pentagon sends more troops to the Middle East. Says Iran says U.S. Israeli strikes have failed to halt its weapons production as its supreme leader declares safety must be taken away from enemies. And then it goes on to talk about here the Pentagon is sending 3 warships and thousands of additional Marines to the Middle East in the second deployment of Marines to the region in the past week. It says roughly 22 to 2,500 Marines from the California-based USS Boxer and Amphibious Ready Group and 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit are heading to the U.S. Central Command, U.S. official says. It says the war neared 3-week mark. Iran projected defiance. Iran projected defiance. Like, once again, defiance. We're defying the U.S. commands. Like, come on now. With the new supreme leader declaring that safety must be taken away from the country's enemies and his army's forces vowing to pursue them even in tourist spots. Says the IRGC denied the U.S. and Israeli strikes have crippled Iranian's ability to produce missiles, a statement attributed to a spokesman who has already been killed in a strike hours earlier. And so it's information like this which doesn't instill confidence in this current administration and the controlling forces behind it that this is going to be something smooth and easy and quick, because it's much greater than the U.S.'s agenda to, as Besant was quoted as saying, is to kill the bad guys, the 200 billion to kill the bad guys. What war has the U.S. ever been involved in that was a measly $200 billion? We've been at the forefront of fighting the war against terrorism and terrorists for over 25 years. All of my adulthood life, we've been in a war against an enemy. And it has cost the American public trillions upon trillions of dollars. And here we are being told that the Pentagon needs 200 billion to fight an enemy that's rooted in thousands of years of history. And this is just going to be a quick little, little scuffle. Okay, come on now. We all know better. We all know better. And the reason this is of importance because this, in my opinion, could be or will end up being one of possibly the last wars that our nation faces, where we are considered to be the leading nation because of the supremacy of our currency and the fact that our military is supposed to be the strongest on the planet, and all the narratives that we've been sold that we are better than thou. And it's this war, in my opinion, and what will come from it that will change all of that, or has changed or will change. Because if and when this does come to an end, the world will never look the same. And the greatest fear of out of all of this should be the idea that any losing side getting to the point where instead of taking a loss, they escalate it to something that it goes beyond the point of return. And of course, the worst fear of any of this could be a nuclear type of event, because this is starting based on Iran, but it won't end based on Iran. Is the question, is the whole primary part. So the entire Middle East will unfortunately be dragged into this, because when missiles fly or boots are officially placed on the soil of another country, it impacts every surrounding country. And that includes all of the Middle East. And then it will go beyond just ideologies. It will go more towards like philosophies and cultural and spiritual wars, because ultimately you're going to have the entire Western world confronting the Middle East region, which is predominantly Muslim. And it could actually eventually turn into some type of holy war. And so these are just all the things playing out in real time. And so how does all this impact us on a day-to-day basis? Oil prices it will not go down no time soon. As much as this administration is going to try to, provide additional supplies, as I mentioned yesterday, tap into that Venezuelan oil with the Jones Act and everything else. And the case will still be for much higher oil prices. And then here's a good article here where Saudi Arabia, who's been the numero uno petrodollar advocate, they're saying Saudi Arabia warns oil prices could spike past 180 a barrel if Iran war rages on. And so, mind you, we're only 20 days or so into this military operation. And the fact that the United States government has no objective other than doing what they're told. It really bothers me most as it becomes obvious that the US is literally just a puppet nation doing as they're being told and going along with it and sacrificing what will potentially be a large amount of lives of American men and women on top of whoever else decides to join, because NATO will be forced into it because it's going to impact their energy. And so once the energy becomes unbearable for the European Union, they're going to be facing a lot of pressure from their populace, and therefore they're going to be forced into the war. So imagine if you're in a Middle East country and you have the US, Israel, and then the NATO nations deciding to intervene, all for the sake of saving their countries from the energy crisis that they're experiencing. And all of this, in my opinion, has been brought on by a singular nation in the smack dab middle of the Middle East. And it is this nation state of Israel and the occupiers of that region. And so this is just stuff that just, yeah, it's life. There's nothing we can do about it other than share our 2 cents on it. And of course, pray for divine intervention because mankind will definitely need it. And the good news about all this, as I'm just ranting and just sharing some thoughts, is that for those who know the final outcome of things, this is not like a doom and gloom, like, oh, cry me a river type of thing. No, this is also an opportunity to really intensify, ramp up your spiritual account, because your faith will definitely be tested one way or another at some capacity for you individually, your household, or those surrounding you. So it always goes back to your faith. Okay, so let me just read some of this article here, and then I want to take some thoughts, ideas, suggestions out here. It says Saudi Arabia. Let me move myself out the way here. Saudi Arabia officials said prices could soar past 180 a barrel if severe supply disruptions from the war in Iran last past April. It says potentially hammering foreign economies and the U.S. as gasoline costs jump at the pumps. So that's another thing. Okay, so Saudi Arabia analysts are saying that if this lingers on, it'll really kick in into April, head into the summer. We're going to continue to see increased prices at the pump. So more of a burden on your pocket costs and surviving. And then here's an article out here from the IEA giving some recommendations on how people can help navigate these higher costs. And I'll just give it to you right now. It says, drive more slowly and work from home to help ease the energy crisis. That's their recommendation. Yeah, that just is just comical. But it says while it will mean big profits for a kingdom that leans heavily on oil reserves, it could also lead to global consumers to slash oil usage of or trigger a recession. And there are also fears that it would cost Saudi Arabia as a profiteer of the war it didn't start. And so while the major oil nations will be reaping the rewards of an increased price, the rest of the world, they will not be able to actually continue to consume it as useful as we do, will eventually lead to the cutting off of other activities. Therefore, a much slower economy. Therefore, the idea of a recession picking up even louder than what it is now. So, as I look at some of the recession polls that are being put out, and once again, everybody who's been paying attention know that we've already been in an economic slowdown, some type of session, as I mentioned the other day. And so due to technology, it makes it easier to cover up and paper over a recession. But let me just share with you some of the recent recession narratives and poll activity. And so let me see. Let me get it to you straight here. And so this here, this is from, let me grab this on the screen if I can. This is from Coin Bureau. And so this was a day or two ago, 2 days ago. It says U.S. recession probability is about to cross 50%. It says since the Iran war began, oil has surged 60% from 70 to 120 a barrel in under 3 weeks. It says Moody's expects the next update to push recession odds past 50%, a level not seen outside an active recession. And then it goes on to give you some a little map here that shows the barrel cost of oil, and of course the recession from the NBER indicators, and the fact that all indices and all indicators for the last several months, if not years or two, has been relatively higher than normal, indicating that there should have been a gray bar, whereas in this case here, a red bar on the screen well before now, even though we still don't have an official gray or red bar on the screen, lets us know that they've been lying to us all along. And so should be no surprise there. But as you can see here, when the oil prices surge, there's always a crisis that is a primary driver of that. And so here we are now with the Iran conflict, and not quite surpassing previous events that were problematic, such as the commodity boom, Russia-Ukrainian war, and now we got the Iranian conflict. So, but we're every event we've had in the last 2 decades are all higher than the Gulf War, the Iran Revolution, and the OPEC embargo from decades ago. And then you factor in during the early 70s, 80s, and 90s, the national debt was not nowhere near as at a historical rate as it is now, which is basically a reflection of the amount of currency in circulation that we've never experienced until this point. So we're just in a very tight spot as a nation with no end in sight. So let's get to a couple other things here. Let me share with you some things that's worth paying attention to beyond the primary subject matter. So here is something I also wanted to talk about. If I can get on the screen here, everybody in the alternative media space was talking about Bibi Netanyahu, and he made a comment or a statement that it doesn't surprise me, but the fact that at this current moment you can say whatever you want and pretty much for the most part get away with it, because Bibi Netanyahu is the primary advocate and driver of this event we're having right now. But this is just a quote of a statement extracted from his little spiel here that's spoken in English of all languages. So he's actually speaking to the American public and not to his own people, because he literally, like, whenever I see Bibi Netanyahu speaking English and not his native tongue, that lets me know who he's speaking to directly. When you are talking in another foreign language that's not your own, that's who you're really intending to get this message across to, which is the U.S. So he's speaking to the U.S., and this is publicized and being promoted on Western media because he's trying to stir up the troops. And he always talks up big Donald Trump. He always commends him for being such a great leader and saying things like, who's going to defy Donald Trump, and all this, blowing all this smoke in Donald Trump's direction, knowing that, I majority of people watching the show know who's really calling the shots. But this little quote here says, Jesus Christ has no advantages over Genghis Khan, because if you are strong enough, ruthless enough, powerful enough, evil will overcome good. And so it could be taken out of context, but it was stated in that exact way. So unless you want to read into it and dive deep into it, on the surface, it has no real genuine meaning, or is not going to stir up or rile up the troops. But the statement of Jesus Christ has no advantage over Genghis Khan, knowing that Israel is a nation that has been blinded to the truth of Christ, knowing that they are working under the spirit of error, and the Talmud and the Babylonian influence is very present in that region there. That statement doesn't surprise me at all. But just the fact it can be broadcasted and he's saying it in English, obviously to the American people, because if he was speaking to his own people, he would be speaking in his own language. So he doesn't need to speak to his own people, because as a controlling force of his nation, they're going to do as he pleases anyway. It's just him trying to get the American people to buy in. And of course, if you don't support this, it's anti-Semitic. So once again, take it as you want. But here's something else that's interesting. This is a somebody put. Did you just see this? He says Fox is merging the American flag with Israel's, and it's showing a little video clip from a news briefing on Fox News. But when you have the merger of two national flags that symbolizing unity of obviously thought, policy, procedure, and everything else, to where regardless of your stance on this matter, it doesn't matter because our government has already chosen a side. So this is just stuff that I can't help but notice, because when your life is being steered by events that you once no part of, but because you're just one of many, this is just the stuff we must deal with. And this is just here's another little I consider it comedy, but I'll share this with you here. The Economist magazine. I bookmark everything that I find humorous or just interesting, but the Economist magazine, this came out 2 days ago. It says war in Iran is making Donald Trump weaker and angrier. And so here's the actual article that you have to pay for. But the point is, it's the cover of this particular article that is what caught my attention. And so this is the cover right here. Let me share this with you. This is the cover. I'll put it on the screen here. So this is the cover here. And as you can see, it says Operation Blind Fury. And of course, people got to poke fun at this particular cover, and they have to come up with their own renditions of it. And so as you can see beneath me here, he's blindfolded with a bandana of the Israeli flag. And so it just goes to show how no one supports this, but it doesn't matter because our government doesn't represent the American public, period. And the illusion that a vote counts is becoming more and more of a farce. And so Ryan says, United States of Israel. And then Dara says it's Jewish duty to deceive Christians. Yeah, that's why we're labeled as Goyim. And so it's just all the spiritual stuff behind this is what really, you know, makes this a very important subject to pay attention to, because you have the Islamic world and the ramping up of mosque in our country. Just go on X and type in mosque, and you'll see people, popping up showing graphs, maps of how mosques are popping up everywhere, and the radical nature of orthodox, true and genuine Islam, and the whole idea of the premise of the expansion of the Islamic faith is to basically convert the infidels, and or if they don't convert peacefully, do it by force. That's where things will eventually head. And then when it comes to the Orthodox Jewish religion of Judaism, which has no real ties with the, you know, love thy neighbor, the new covenant style of faith, they are more so pressed into using every leverage that they have and enslaving humanity by basically making the Goyim subservient to a special race of people, which happens to be those that call themselves to be Jews. So yeah, I mean, that's just, based upon what we see on a day-to-day basis and what we've become to know as truth. And it's not like I'm pro all races, but it's just, certain ideologies that, you can't ignore. Says Mike, hold on, I thought you was moving to Dubai. I never said Dubai. I don't think so, buddy. And so whatever happened to Nicolas Maduro? Nicolas Maduro, man, he sold his nation out. He gave up, and they gave us the illusion of him being brought out in handcuffs, and they freed the Venezuelan people. But he took a plea, and I'm sure he's probably, very comfy now with a nice, Swiss bank account, and he's probably like in a New York penthouse right now under house arrest. And it's better to exit quietly than to be taken out and to be canceled from the land of the living. So if you had a choice, you're gonna surrender, give your country up, take a plea deal, get a couple mil, live comfortably, or you're gonna fight the Chavista movement and they'll kill you and replace you with somebody else anyway. Yeah. A religion ain't a race, 100%. Whatever. So yeah, this is just some things I'll keep an eye on. But as a result of all this, the idea of troops moving, more troops moving, expect more of a market sell-off, putting more pressure on the Fed to respond because you can't continue to have, a sell-off in stocks, increase in yield in bonds, and you're going to have a lot of liquidity flowing out of stocks especially to go into safety. Gold and silver, as of right now, I'm hearing lots of narratives about what's happening out east and the physical capturing by the Asian markets and everybody else getting physical. And that's literally which witnessing the futures being dumped, which is very probable. But then again, the race to get physical will remain because once the spigots are cut on, and all central banks are forced to realize the inevitable, then that's when gold and silver will see prices that we couldn't have fathomed. And then just to show that there are some people out there who are betting pretty big on the direction of gold. Looking at some of the futures and the prices that people are willing to put out there. Let me share with you what I'm referring to here. So let me gold futures let me see, gold future. Let me share with you something here that is very, very concerning. So there are people putting bets on the price of gold to reach five figures easy. And let me see, I didn't bookmark it, but there are some very strong hedges out there of people positioning themselves for a future date of what they anticipate gold to be. And they're betting billions that between now and that time, those contracts will be fulfilled. And basically, the floor for a lot of those futures contracts are $16,000 an ounce in gold and higher. And so either someone's going to lose a lot or someone's going to become very wealthy based upon what they anticipate or are willing to bet on. So if we get anywhere near that as a result of all this conflict in the Middle East, so if gold was to go to 16,000 plus, and we got all the too big to fail banks pricing in, 6,500 gold and just something more normal, given that we're, a little bit less than 5,000 now, where will silver be at that point? So it's $16,000 gold plus silver was going to be, $50 an ounce, $100 an ounce. No, it's going to be a lot higher than that. And so that's where you get in the whole ratio side of things. We'll see, but it's good to say silver will probably shoot higher, faster, and stronger than that gold price. So that means silver could get to that $1,000 range. Just speaking at the end of towards the end of all this chaos as it unfolds, that means that the Fed would have cut it. We'll probably be in negative interest rate territory. 15, 20 trillion would have been put out there for the war and the Wall Street and everybody else. And yeah, that's some stuff that we have to wait and see what that looks like because it's too soon to talk like that. But you get my drift. There's big people out there putting big funds on the line, anticipating a much higher gold price. So therefore, silver will follow, and that's just something to keep in mind. So the price of silver at this current moment is fairly cheap, and it still can go lower until the Fed decides to pivot and we get off to the races. So anyway, more market sell off, more opportunity out there for those who realize, and also actually having a cash position at this current moment could do you some good because there will be opportunities out there to buy whatever it is you like before the spigot cuts on and the currency, of course, is diluted and debased into oblivion, and gold and silver becomes a primary liquidity source for people who actually have them. And of course, better believe banks will make sure cryptos will be very favorable as well, because that is the next form of currency that they want to utilize. And as the average worker, jobs are disrupted, housing issues continue to persist. It makes it ripe for the government to come in with the solution of, universal basic income. There'll be some stimmy checks or permanent monthly income for those who comply and, you know, give up their entire rights and become a part of the system officially. So these are the things that they're working towards. So this is that 2026, early 2026 chaos that's needed to get us to the 27, 28 reboot, preparing us for the Great Reset, which will be complete by 2030. And then after that, you know, yeah, we ain't no telling what the world look like then. But yeah, this is just some things that are possible. But in the meantime, today's Friday, and in Detroit, we got pretty good weather. So I'm gonna enjoy my day, go out and make some moves, have some fun, live it up, live, laugh, learn, and do what I do. But I just need to connect my people and just share with you what's happening and how these are the beginning days of what will be the restructuring of our way of life here in our country. So, but then again, there's always opportunity, depending on how you look at it. So, with that being the case, good people, be blessed, be safe. I will see you later. Shalom.